Welcome my friends to another Bully 2 discussion video. So the last Bully 2 video that I made a couple weeks ago now, it went down pretty well. And in that video I was just talking about my thoughts on when I think a possible Bully 2 would come out, as in its release date. And people seem to like my thoughts, so, I have had more thoughts regarding Bully 2, so I want to share them with you again today. And today I'll be sharing my thoughts on when I think Bully 2 should be set. Now when I say should be set, I'm talking about the time period, as in the year the game should be set in. And before I do continue, I would like to say this is just an idea that I've had within my own mind. This is just an idea that I think would be cool, and I just want to share it with you guys. I'm not going to claim that this is going to be true, or, I have no evidence regarding Bully 2. Rockstar hasn't even announced Bully 2, or even, hinted at the developing the game. This is just, in my opinion, a really cool idea. And that idea is that I think Bully 2 should be set in the 80s. That is the 1980s. Okay, so with all that stuff out the way, let's jump into this Bully 2 discussion / speculation video. So yes, essentially I think the 80s would be an amazing period to set Bully 2 in. Why do I think this? Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but as of late, there has been a bit of a resurgence in 80s pop culture, just kind of in the last few years or so. I think, it's partially thanks to, things like Stranger Things and the recent rise of, these synthwave and retro rave genres of music. The retro 80s aesthetic and just style, I guess, it kind of just appeals to a lot of people. I'm not quite sure why. I think people just like to look back and romanticize the past when times were considered simpler. Whether they were or not, they are considered by some to be simpler. I also think a lot of people would say the best media came out in the 80s. If we think about all the music, movies, cars, clothes, and just all that good stuff. The thing about the 80s in particular is a lot of people that grew up in the 80s, they're still fairly young today, and they kind of have that, nostalgia for their childhood. But also, those people that grew up in the 80s are now raising the youth of today. So these parents are most probably going to pass down their favourite childhood media to their kids. That's just a natural thing that happens. These types of things are passed down. The likes and interests of a parent normally do get passed down to the next generation. Myself, I was shown tons of 80s media growing up. I was a very young age when I was first, introduced to it. I think that's a big reason why those born kind of in the late 90s and early 2000s, that's why they get nostalgic about the 80s. Even though they weren't brought up in the 80s, they were kind of brought up surrounded by the media of the 80s. And so that's kind of why they get nostalgic about it. But that being said, their form of nostalgia is very different to those who have actually been brought up in the 80s. Their kind of nostalgia is, is seen through rose-tinted glasses, because the only way they can really experience the 80s is through the media that has lasted on through the years. So, a lot of what their experience is kind of a heightened, romanticized version of the 80s, and it's not necessarily representative of the 80s as a whole. I'm not one of those wrong generation people, but I do have quite a strong love for the idea, at least, of the 80s that I've created in my own head, and especially that of the American 80s. There's just something just so charming about it. And also, the 80s, it wasn't that long ago. We still have, a nice neon lit window to look at the 80s through, and, look back and bask in the glory of what the 80s was. So all of what I've just talked about here is why I think the 80s would be a perfect setting for Bully 2. So first of all, the Bully series is a series, to put it simply, about school and being in education. And one of the most popular settings in 80s media is a school or college. So, straight off the bat, Bully already has the perfect setting for this time period. And like I said before, 80s culture is just so rich with some of the most iconic things, from cars, clothes, and just the general lifestyle of that time. It's so perfect that, it's made for a game. It's made for a game that's set in a school or college. Actually, thinking about it right now, I think a college would be the better place to set Bully 2. Because, Bully 1, it was set in a boarding school, and I think having the character live in the actual school is quite an important part of the game. With a college, the game can, keep the whole dormitory mechanic, where the character actually lives in a dormitory. And I think it will just, allow for the player to, bask in the college setting. But there is one thing. If Bully 2 was to be set in the 80s, we would not see a return of Jimmy Hopkins. Well, we most probably wouldn't see a return of Jimmy Hopkins. It was never 100% stated when Bully 1 took place, but a lot of people, think it was sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s, like the year 2000 to 2006 maybe. At this point, I think it's safe to say that Bully 1 was not set during or before the 80s, so we most probably wouldn't see a return of Jimmy Hopkins. But I'm okay with that. Jimmy Hopkins was great, but he's not like, I don't think he's the hook for Bully. I really do think the school setting is kind of the hook for Bully. I'm totally okay with having a whole new character, especially if we get to experience this character in a game set in the 80s time period. Really thinking about it, there are not many open world AAA games set in the retro 80s. Most of the time, this time period is only really explored by indie devs who are going for, like, you know, a deeply stylistic feel. You know, think of games like Hotline Miami, for example. So I do think if anyone could pull this off, you know, it's Rockstar. We've already seen their great success tackling Red Dead Redemption and GTA, and you know, we have GTA to focus on kind of the modern day setting, so I think Bully 2 would allow them to kind of stray off the path a bit, and you know, just allow them to, you know, get really creative with it and just explore this you know, time period that's kind of contemporary, but it's not modern. I just think there is so much they can do with the 80s college setting, and it's the perfect time right now with the whole resurgence of this 80s culture to you know, just to do it in. I do think their creativity could really flow here. Anyway, I think I've gone on for long enough now. Feel free to tell me what you think of this idea. If not the 80s, then when should Bully 2, you know, be set? Feel free to whack down your ideas in the comments below. My friends, if you like what you see here, feel free to leave a like, and if you do want to see more, consider subscribing. Your viewership is always appreciated, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.